What we're learning today is how to add and subtract fractions, and there's a few steps that are involved with this, and you got to make sure that you follow all these steps and all these rules for adding and subtracting fractions. First rule when you add or subtract fractions is the bottom numbers, or the denominators, have to be the same. So if you see in this particular problem we have 1/3 plus 2/5. The denominators are 5 and 3, so we can't add this right now as is. So we have to change them. So what we do is we look at our denominators, and here we have 5 and 3. And we ask ourselves, what's the smallest number that both 5 and 3 can divide into? Now, if you're not sure, you take the bigger of the two denominators, 5, and we're going to count by 5s. 5, 10, 15, 20, usually 4 times is about enough. And then we look at it and say, okay, out of those numbers, which one can 3 divide into? Well, looking at it, it looks like 15 is. So that's the number we're going to use for our new fractions, our equivalent fractions. So we'll make them into 15ths. Now the other day, in the other lesson that's attached to this as well, we learned how to make equivalent fractions. So 3 times what equals 15? Well, that would be times 5. Rule is, whatever you do to the bottom, you got to do the top. So I got to do times 5 on the top. 1 times 5 is 5. So 1/3 is the same as 5/15. Now I do this one. 5 to 15 would be times 3. And I do times 3 on the top. And 2 times 3 is 6. So 6/15 is the same as 2/5. Now, when we add or subtract fractions, we only add or subtract the numerators, or the top numbers. So here I have a 5, here I have a 6. 5 plus 6 is 11. Now the bottom number stays the same because they're all the same size pieces, in this case 15ths. So our answer would be 1/3 plus 2/5 equals 11/15. Now the last thing that we do on every single problem is reduce it if we can. So if I look at 11/15, I ask myself, is there a number that can divide into 11 and 15 besides the number 1? Well, in this case, there isn't. There's no number that can divide into 11 or 15 equally besides 1. So that means our answer is simplified or reduced. Let's try another one. Here's one that's a subtraction problem. I have an 8 and a 4. I can't subtract it yet because my denominators aren't the same. That means common denominators. So I take the biggest one, and I'm going to count by 8s. 8, 16, 24, and 32. And then I look at my other one and I say, okay, which one of those, the smallest one, that 4 can go into? Well, it looks like 8. So we're going to make these both into 8s. Okay, then we make equivalent fractions. 8 times 1 is 8, so I do the same to the top. 7 times 1 is 7. On the bottom, 4 times 2 is 8, so I got to do the same to the numerator. 1 times 2 is 2. Now I subtract them. 7 minus 2 is 5, and they stay 8s. So my answer would be 5/8. Now I check to see if I can reduce it. Is there anything that can go into 5 and 8 equally? Nope, there isn't. So that's my answer, 5/8. That's how you add or subtract fractions. You have to make the denominators the same first.